The children of the children, yeah. But there's still rideouts at the track.
Well, that's one of the interesting things that I, was excited about, in the last chapters of your book, that you kind of tie those threads in terms of like who is still, in the area.
Well, her grandson has been fabulous since the book came out.
Nice.
Yeah. Very cooperative.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah.
Okay, well, our little red button on the screen says that we are officially live on Facebook now. So I want to extend an official welcome to everyone who is tuning in tonight on our Facebook page, and to introduce and warmly welcome both Nina Fout, who is an Olympic bronze medalist, as one of the many hats she has worn throughout her life and career, and also Vicky Moon, who is a journalist and an author. Her most recent publication is Sylvia Rideout Bishop Had a Way with Horses. Tonight we'll be talking a little bit about the different challenges and opportunities that women like Nina and Sylvia have faced, and how they are similar, how they're different, and how the equestrian community and the role of family, plays a big part in those stories and in those legacies. So I don't know if Vicky or Nina have any comments or thoughts before we dive in tonight. Okay. Before we get started, I guess I should do just a little official pitch for the book. I'm not sure how many of you out there are familiar with Sylvia Rideout Bishop. If you're not familiar with her, Vicky's book is a great read. It's very approachable. I know, and Vicky has her title in her screen too, that you can see. And you can see I've got little notes in where I've been making some highlights, but it's a great way not only to dive into Sylvia's life, but if you're someone who's interested in equestrian history, you don't have to be an equestrian to read this book. She'll walk it through. She makes it very approachable. You also don't have to be from Charlestown, to understand this book. It's very readable, but the depth is admirable. You're definitely getting some knowledge in, but she's sneaky. You enjoy reading the book, and then afterwards you figure out you've learned something. So kudos to Vicky for doing that project, for bringing this story to light. And thank you both, Vicky and Nina, for being here tonight.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
So the way that tonight's conversation will work, we have some points, around our themes that we're going to talk about tonight, but we invite everyone who's watching it on Facebook to field us some of your questions, or if there's something interesting that you want to hear more about from one of these two ladies, feel free to give us a shout out in the Facebook comments. I will be getting a live feed of those comments and suggestions from my colleague who will be sending them to me, so you do have a direct line in. This is by no means a closed door kind of an event. So to get started, I guess what I'd really like to have happen is for each of you to give us, a little bit of a biography, a little bit about yourself, what you do and how you got here. And I'm going to make it extra hard for Vicky, because I want Vicky to talk a little bit about herself, but then tell us a little bit about Sylvia as well. And if you can, a little about her major achievements and her story. So not to put you on the spot, but Vicky, can you get us kicked off?
Well, in short, I'm a writer who happens to love horses, or I love horses and happen to be a writer. And it just fell into place one time when I was on the horse show circuit, and happened to go to a press conference after a major event. And when I walked into the room and I saw these people and cameras taking notes, I stayed up all night and wrote a story, and they published it. A woman in California published it in the Horses magazine, and I got a check for $100. And I thought, okay, this will do. And that was it. I found a way to be around the horses in a different way.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you have a favorite, you ride, but do you have a favorite sport within that equestrian community?
Yeah, well, I hate to say it, especially all those years on the horse show circuit, but definitely racing has always been my favorite because I grew up in Florida
Mm,
and my parents had racehorses.
Uh-oh.
But if my mother had one running in South Florida at Gulfstream, or I hate to age myself out, Hialeah, she would let me skip school to go to the races.
that's
And
always a perk.
that was a true perk. I don't ever want to, Hialeah still stands and other people have been back there. I don't ever want to go. I want to hold that memory of those pink buildings and Angel Cordero.
Yeah, you're dating yourself.
Yeah.
I think you're in good company. I think you're okay there.
Okay. So as far as Sylvia is concerned, I feel like a broken record that I'm going to tell this story again, but I was standing in a line to get a cup of coffee in Marshall. Most everybody here can identify with Marshall. And I started talking to this man in front of me, behind me, I don't know what it was. I was working on a book about women who love horses. I had the contract, I had everything, but he said, "Oh, you need to meet my aunt," or whatever. I forget how they were related. And 2 days later, I went to meet her in her apartment in Charlestown. And I called my editor and publisher and I said, "I just want to write about this one woman." And they said, "Well, we're sorry, but you can keep the money we've given you. You go ahead." So that from that moment, it was 15 years until right now.
Yeah. Yeah. So Sylvia for her part, of course, being born in the early 20th century in Charlestown as a part of this large, African American family network, she didn't necessarily start out in an equestrian family, right?
No, not a little bit. It was the photo on the cover, the little pony. The man comes around, takes your picture, and for 25 cents you get the photo. But at that moment, she fell in love with that pony. She even tells me about how, she leaned over and gave him a hug. And Nina will agree, I'm sure, it's that smell. It's that, here's this wonderful thing. And I have a great story about that pony that I only found out 2 or 3 weeks ago when somebody sent me a photo of their father on the same pony.
No.
The father was from Winchester, and her uncle, Howard Allen, the Middleburg photographer, okay, Howard Allen had his photo on the same pony.
Oh my gosh, what a small world.
What a small
I love
world.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did Paige make that connection?
No, not yet. I have the photo that her cousin Brooke. Now
Okay.
you understand now why Betsy's daughter is named Brooke after Betsy's cousin. And there's one other brother. So all three brothers had their photo taken on that very same pony.
What a crazy coincidence.
Yeah,
There's
I love
a lot of coincidence.
Well, maybe that's going to be your next book now, Vicky, is you have to dive into all of the individuals who got their photos taken with this pony.
I tried very hard to learn more about that phenomenon, because it wasn't just in Charlestown or Winchester. You see those pictures once in a while on Facebook, and I called several experts. One of them was Billy Steinkraus, who knew everything there was about the history of horses, and he couldn't give me any more than that.
Interesting. So we'll have to schedule another program for the history of the life of this pony. That I think more is out there. If anyone out there has photos of relatives or in their attics of, a young person with a pony, let us know. It might be part of this tangled web. But Nina, as we're talking about, our biographies, how we came into this, can you tell us a little about yourself, who you are, where you come from, and what what brought you from then to now?
Well, I'm a native of Fauquier County, so I haven't really gone very far. Still live one field across from the farm from where I was born. And I was extremely fortunate to grow up in a family who were all horse crazy. My father was a professional horseman. He started off as a professional show jumping rider, and then he eventually then became a racehorse trainer. My mother had always been a lifelong passionate show rider slash fox hunter. And so I grew up on a farm with parents who were very involved with horses. And my brother and I were very close in age. Our sister's a little bit younger than us. So my brother and I really spent most of our time running around the countryside on ponies. And sometimes it wasn't until between school time and dinner time that our parents could find us, because we came in when it was almost dark and ready for dinner. And that's pretty much how I grew up.
Lucky.
Yep.
Now, I understand that your father, Paul, of course, he was from upstate New York, and there's the adage that you're really not a Virginian unless you've been here at least 4 generations, I think is the metric. Was that ever something that you encountered as when you were growing up, or did you really still feel like you were born right here? This is your heritage as much as anything else.
Yeah, I think it's my heritage. I mean, my great grandmother came to Warrenton, Virginia in 1902, so I'm going to ride on her coattails that I'm a real Virginian.
Yeah, I think that's exactly.
Yeah. So yes, I feel very, very fortunate, and I really believe that I was on the receiving end of that quote that people say it takes a village to get someone somewhere, and I really feel like I was the lucky kid who lived in the wonderful village that like boosted me up and gave me the wings to go to the places I was able to go to. But it was all because of this community that gave me all those tools and all that support to get there.
Yeah. And with that being said, as I mentioned, you've worn, a variety of hats, even just during your professional career, not only in riding, but then you've also owned an art and framing shop, and you also now are on a whole new career path too, as far as landscape design. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, growing up and having your parents both immersed in the horse business, my mother was an artist, so I had always had that art interest on the side. But my father always felt very strongly that horses are always going to be a given and that we should always have another feather in our cap. And so he felt strongly that we continue to pursue other interests. So for me, it was juggling and trying to maintain the balance of having a working life and also maintaining the balance of the horse life, where I could still maintain my training level as a competitor to be competitive. So that was always that juggle and that balance. And I decided to close my frame shop after 20 years of owning it right before I went to the Olympics. And then I decided that 20 years of retail and selling sporting art, that was probably the best chapter to close and to start something new. And all the while, thanks to my childhood eventing mentor and coach, Jimmy Wofford, he had always encouraged me to get involved in course design, of which I had for the sport of eventing. And somehow I got myself into a landscaping program at GW University when I came back from the Olympics. And one thing led to another. And my professor at GW said, well, you just passed phase 1. If you want to enter the whole program, you can. And I thought, oh, gee, I was just doing phase 1 of this landscaping program because Wofford kept complaining that I needed to learn how to render graphically on paper and learn about topo and scale and all that stuff. So I thought, oh, I did the graphics course, I'm good to go. And the professor said, actually, you should join the program. And so the next thing I knew, 3 years later, I'd completed the landscape design program at GW. And then I sort of thought, well, this is kind of fun. And then I became a real tree hugger and a total plant geek. And haven't looked back. It's been really fun. And the commonalities that it ties in with course design are so similar because You still have a ribbon of greenery that you have to tackle. You have to analyze the drainage, the swales, the orientation before you do your design work. So there's a lot of site analysis and site engineering that is very similar with landscape design that I'd already been involved with cross-country course design. So it's been fun. And I still do a little bit of course design. And the two complement each other well. Yep.
So it's, I mean, and I, we were speaking before we went live too about how you're still running the Beagles and you're still very active. You still run Paul Fout stables. It's
sure.
You're still doing a lot of juggling, I think.
I suppose I pursue whatever interests me and intrigues me. And most of everything I do does seem to be pretty much targeted to the out of doors and the aesthetic of the natural world that we're in and surrounded by. And so with all that said, it really kind of resonates one common thread, the out of doors conservation, the appreciation of our surroundings. I know I'm very lucky, as all of us are, that live in this little bubble out here of green space. And part of the mission of the Beagle program, of which my mother started 60 years ago, is to continue engaging children to the great out of doors and to nature and help them really understand the impact and the importance of conservation and of nature. And so, yeah, that's something I really believe in. My mother was a big spearhead in the conservation movement and her involvement with the PEC. And, as I learn more about how important education is to the younger generation, and the younger generation is really the future of conservation for this area, it's I find it a really important thing to devote my time to, because so many people had given so much of their time to teach me as a child on my fat little fuzzy pony to do my journey on horses. And I feel like it's the least I can do to give back to the kids in this community.
Yeah. I really love that sentiment. And I'm going to put a pin in that because I want to circle back to this idea of, what does landscape mean to the history of the sports that we're talking about, the history of the individuals that we're talking about. But one thing I wanted to dig into, as we kick off this program is this idea. When you read Vicky's book about Sylvia Rideout Bishop, you're constantly reminded of the framework of the time, and the landscape in which she's growing up. So we're talking about the different tracks, that she goes to in places like Timonium and Hagerstown, where you don't really think about there being open spaces to have these events take place. But at the same time, Vicky is adding in these, pockets about, oh, what is President Eisenhower doing this week? The same week that Bright Gem is running at Charlestown. And she also layers in these really great social elements as well, as far as what is happening with the restaurant sit-ins during, President Kennedy's tenure as president, and how that doesn't necessarily impact outright things that Sylvia is doing, but that it's this constant undercurrent. And I was curious, Vicky, if you could tell us what you thought about the obstacles that Sylvia was facing as she was unofficially a trainer, and why did she have to be unofficially a trainer, and what kind of treatment did she get at the racetracks, when she was first getting started?
That's a very good question, to which my prompt answer would be, I did not go into this thinking, oh, this is a Black woman. Right. I was thinking of a woman, okay? And it wasn't until later that I realized perhaps it was equal parts, but I really think that her struggles were as a woman. And there are still women today over there at that track or anywhere who will tell you that there are unseen barriers in their way. Mm-hmm. And it's sometimes minor. Oh, we don't have enough stalls for you over here. When, one woman said, well, there's, 3 barns that are empty. Why can't I, put my horses over there? Okay, so a bias 80% of the bias was that she was a woman. The 20% was, we're in the South and she's Black. Okay. And I'm sure you remember at one time when she was at the Timonium track, and they still run over there. They have events going on over there. And somebody wanted to drink, and it was like, there's the hose. Don't you dare drink out of the fountain. Okay. And when she traveled, and I learned about the Green Book well before this fabulous movie came about.
Yeah.
And I have a copy of the Green Book. I was looking at it because when she went to Timonium, or my favorite was Cumberland. What a beautiful place that is. Yeah. Nina, you would love it over there. Okay. She had to take the Green Book with her to find a place to stay. Never mind eat, stay overnight.
Yeah, those are very poignant, elements as we're learning this story, especially because, Sylvia was the first licensed African-American woman horse trainer in West Virginia, or nationally, I should say. But she was training well before that. She was already doing the work, right? She was
exactly
just not being recognized.
Exactly. And, I'm sure you saw it, that in the book, if there was one, there were 5 or 6 or 7 people who told me that, her husband's name, her first husband's name, but she's preparing the horse. She's getting up and going to the track every morning and getting the horse ready to race, and he steps in to get his picture taken.
Yeah, it's hard when you're reading the book, it's hard not to feel some of that frustration, because as you're kind of telling this story about, Sylvia's up at 3 or 4 a.m. to get everything ready, and then next to it on the page is a photo of, the winner's circle, and, her husband is right there. So it's really impactful, I think, the way that you present it, but from Sylvia's perspective, it seems as though she takes it all in stride.
She really did. And she never badmouthed the first husband. She never badmouthed anybody, but it was up to me to figure it out. And then I went about interviewing probably several hundred people who then told me later, hey, guess what?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we'll try to continue that habit of not badmouthing anybody for sure. But I was also curious, Nina, you're coming into the professional ring, a generation later. Things are obviously different, but things change slowly, not just in the South, not just in, the equestrian circle, but in society in general. And did you feel any, I don't know, side eyes or negativity when you were coming up?
No, not at all. However, I was extremely aware of the racetrack culture with my father being a racehorse trainer.
Sure.
And growing up and going to the races with him in the 60s and 70s. And my father did have African-American gentlemen who worked for him at the racetrack. And the culture and the life then for them traveling to the races, it was a tough life in the sense that the hours were long. There were very few luxuries, and it wasn't intentional. It just seemed like that is the way the racetrack life seemed to be then. The men, there was a lot of cots in the tack rooms and in the stall areas at the racetracks that these guys slept on, army cots. I mean, it just seemed like that's what they did.
Right.
So it was a different culture, different time. But I will say, from a bird's eye point of view, being a child looking in, these men who worked at the racetrack loved their animals. They adored their animals. And that in itself is just so wonderful to know. And they were just very attached. But yes, it was just it was a hard life for those fellows. And so I felt very lucky taking the route of hunting and showing, which was all fun and very educational. And I just felt very, very, very fortunate.
Yeah.
The struggles were really not so much culturally or socially. And if you really like something and you sink your teeth into it and you're determined to just sort of see a sport out, my journey was just a journey because I really enjoyed what I did and I was determined to keep doing it despite an injury here, an injury there, of which I racked up many. I mean, I could light up New York City with all my broken bones and x-rays, but you know, that those things aren't really setbacks. If you just enjoy what you do, you're just going to carry on with it. So I just consider myself very lucky.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting that you know, that you use some of that terminology, because it seems as though that's the kind of attitude, that's the impression that I get from Sylvia's perspective as told by Vicky. And Vicky, would you agree with that was kind of a mentality that she had in terms of, you know, she fell in love with horses in a very, you know, specific way. You know, she got on this pony, she had an experience, and that was kind of it for her. It was all over. She was going to find a way,
Right.
you know, to work with horses. Is that accurate?
That's accurate. And I think even as Nina explains it, you know, she loved that. She was going to do that. And I've said this even before I did this book. Let's say that there are 10 people who want to ride in the Olympics or write a book or whatever. 3 of them, in my opinion, will succeed. And that is by sheer determination. The others will drop out for one reason or another and become the best. Who knows what the other 7 are doing today?
Yeah.
I want to interject Sylvia's journey. She, you know, the life of being on the road and training racehorses, just the luck of the draw of the winnings of a racehorse can be a roller coaster experience. And to read about her journey of success and then struggling to make personal payments and her debt, but still coming out of it and never losing sight of her passion for training racehorses is basically, that's really what it's all about. She just loved it. And sometimes you will just put up with all of those setbacks because you just truly, that's your happy place. You will do anything to reclaim your happy place. Yeah.
That's it. That's it.
Yeah.
I hope the next few generations get it. I'm sure they will.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Less
I really like that. So one thing that I know Nina has pointed out specifically is that, you know, Nina had a village that she feels helped, you know, get her to where she needed to be, or helped her get started on the right track, or helped encourage her at key points. Vicky, could you point out any individuals or any opportunities that you felt were examples of a village coming to either support Sylvia, or a village that Sylvia kind of picked for herself? Because it seems as there are a couple of individuals or opportunities that she took advantage of. I'm thinking of Tyson Gilpin, but I'm sure there are many others.
I'm sure. I'm so happy that you mentioned Tyson Gilpin,
Yes.
my new hero. Well, he's always been my hero. And there are so many coincidences that we talked about before with the pony and everything. But Tyson Gilpin is one of them, because my husband and I have gone to Saratoga every summer for many, many years. I don't want to admit, because I've already dated myself at Hialeah. But together, the first big story we ever did was at Saratoga during the sales, which I love. And we followed Tyson Gilpin and Wayne and Susie Chatfield Taylor from start to finish at the sales. Okay. So as some people who are really horsey will know, that this man, you know, lived in Clark County, and his father started the sales company Fazek Tipton. And then Tyson was 28 years old when he took it over. Well, guess what? It's going to be 100 years this year. Yeah. And so I'm going to be there with my book this year. They're going to celebrate 100 years. And I'm just blown away by that coincidence. And I don't know if Nina or anybody here has seen photographs of his son, but when I first posted a picture of Tyson Jr., people were blown away by the resemblance. It's frightening.
Yeah, it
And
is. Yeah.
so I hope that Tyson Jr. will come up there as well.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So Tyson is obviously a key, a key player in Sylvia's career, especially as she's kind of bridging that gap from being owner into trainer, and he kind of takes her under his wing a little bit. But it strikes me that, the second time she enters the career, it's kind of like a Michael Jordan moment. She comes out of retirement and is still at the top of her game. She's also, benefiting from a community that's there ready to kind of take her on as well. Am I reading you right there when you're talking about her coming back in?
Definitely. And when you speak about the second the second wave for Sylvia was during maybe the late 70s, but every trainer at the track, everybody was having a financial problem because the ownership and the management of the track was under a lot of pressure. So here's another most amazing coincidence, that she took a job in Berryville, Virginia, a printing place in Berryville that was Doubleday and Company. Okay. And so one night, my agent died right before, the agent that I had hooked up with. And so I have an agent, and I saw this ad on the television at 2 a.m. about Berryville graphics. And I called them, and I got the only man there who loves horse racing. And I told him about my book and that I already had the chapter on Doubleday. Whatever, would they print my book? Yes, they would. It's owned by Bertelsmann now, the largest privately owned publisher in the world. Okay. Wow. And the trips over there to meet with this guy, it was incredible. And then on the day when I went to pick up the book, 4 people came out of the building who had worked with Sylvia.
Oh, that's wonderful.
That's really cool.
And they print everything over there, for Random House. I mean, Bertelsmann owns all these other publishing groups.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's really interesting, because it feels like kind of a hometown hero, that Sylvia is, say what you will about Saratoga, it's wonderful, but it has that kind of glitzy feel to it. Whereas, Charlestown is a hometown kind of a place. Shenandoah Downs is a hometown kind of a place.
Yeah.
But Berryville, who would think? I mean, I've been to Berryville. You've been to Berryville umpteen million times, and you've never taken a right-hand turn to see this massive place where the tractor trailers are lined up front to back by the dozen to pick up. And one day the man says to me, well, I can't invite you in. Well, he couldn't invite me in anyway. He says, but we're on security lockdown. And I didn't ask, but I knew what that was. I waited a week and I said, what was that? Security lockdown. He said, we just published 1 million copies of the Obama book. And then I read Carl Hyacin. I don't know if anybody knows who he is. A funny writer from South Florida. In the back of the book, it says printed in Berryville, Virginia. Okay. Jane Smiley, Berryville, Virginia. So it was just a lucky thing.
That's pretty cool. That's
very fortuitous. That's great.
Yeah. Yeah. So as we're talking, this community that obviously, not only creates, an individual, but also evolves with an individual. And we see those individuals changing throughout Sylvia's life, of course. But I wonder, Nina, could you tell us about, Jimmy? Obviously, Jimmy Wofford is someone who kind of brings you through key stages of your life. Are there other people that you would say, either passed you a baton, or that you feel you are eager to pass a baton to?
Wow. That's a really, really good question. I mean, it's easier to reflect backwards and just say that, you know, within the sport of eventing, I think I was so lucky because I was touched by the famous Bert Denemeth, the famous Jack LeGoff, Jimmy, Mark Phillips more recently. Gunnar Ostergaard helped us a little bit on the flat up at the New Jersey site. Ann Krasinski helped us some with show jumping when I was doing team training. George Morris helped me right before I went to the Olympics with 3 magic beans, because George had been great friends with my parents because they all were contemporaries and had shown together. And George was so funny because he said, Nina, you know, I love your parents, but I would never buy one of your father's racehorses because they're very difficult to teach how to jump cleanly behind, because they're so quick with their hind legs, they will knock a pole down. And so I said, well, right, George, well, that's why I'm here, for you to help me to teach my horse to jump cleanly. And George did. I jumped a clean round at the Olympics, so I credit George for that. But it's the journey from then until now, and the inspiration and passing the baton. I think really the only thing that I can think of that's positive of looking forward is to still continue reaching out and teaching and helping the next generation. The sport of horses has changed. It's obviously, it was very amateur when I was growing up. As I say, I was a byproduct of fox hunting here with the Orange County Hunt, going to the MOC Pony Club, which my mother had started, galloping racehorses for my father a little bit, and showing a lot as a little kid on my pony, and then on racehorses that my mother would take back to the farm for us to reschool and resell after they had finished their racing career with my father. So, you know, I feel like, and back then there was no such thing as a sponsorship or no such thing as prize money at a horse show or an event. You just did it because you loved it. The parents who taught us in Pony Club gave their time. I mean, we had fathers who literally put us in their little homemade vans and drove us to Pony Club rallies. I mean, who does that anymore? It was just an era that we all thought was normal. You know, everybody packed a picnic lunch and off you went. There were no concessions. The life was pretty simple. So, and now I just look forward to the modern era. Things are different. Social media has really put a new dimension on things, good, bad, or indifferent, but the awareness is slightly different. It's helped sponsorship and awareness. And I'm grateful for all that. I mean, I have really been fortunate with sponsorship and awareness. You know, I have to put a kudos out to Tri-County to thank them for their support, and to the Macaulay's feeds, you know, because it's people like that who really do make a huge difference, and you try to represent them as well as you can. But like I say, it's a different world. And I think to instill the basics, to instill good horsemanship, to inspire kids to be the best they can be and to enjoy it. And it's really, you know, I'm a big believer that grassroots, there's a lot to be said for just simple grassroots, good hard work, that it's not about stroking a big check, but just get in there and get it done and enjoy the journey. I just wanted to put a plug in about racing. You know, I was a product of a racing father and brother, then subsequently a trainer and still a trainer. And for me, my journey to the Olympics was really special because I rode a horse that was a thoroughbred, obviously, that my father had trained, and his owners had bred, and they had sadly passed away. So the only thing that really, I mean, so it was just a nice way to put a bow on my whole life journey with horses, that I rode a horse trained in our family, bred by people that my father trained for, and then he went to the Olympics, and then he also took me to every big event in Europe that I ever wanted to go to, and I got to ride on that horse to all those events.
And that was all 3 magic beans, right?
That was all Beanie. Yeah. Yep. So I feel really, really fortunate. And yeah, the only sad thing is that the people who bred him had died before they knew that Beanie was going to the Olympics. So I feel bad for that, the people that had bred him. I wish they had known that their horse had gone to the Olympics. He wasn't He wasn't a great racehorse. He had a wind problem, but the wind didn't seem to slow him up. He would still pull my arms out on cross country.
It's really interesting to hear you talk about Beanie, if I may use his nickname. To hear you talk about Beanie, because there's obviously not just a special relationship between, a rider or a trainer and horses in general, but there's always one or two that stick out that really become a big part of your heart.
Right.
And I feel like, Three Magic Beans is one of those horses.
Absolutely.
For you, Nina. And then, conversely, when reading about Sylvia, one of the, sorry, my dog just came in and wanted
your
to
dog. I thought it was the dog in the mudroom.
No,
oh yeah,
no, mine is
asleep. Molly's asleep now.
freewheeling. But Sylvia, one of the horses that stands out, I think, in this book is Chalky. Is this mare that Sylvia purchases and trains, and then subsequently, I think, also trains four of her offspring. Is that right? Vicky?
Yeah.
And can you tell us any more about her relationship with Chalky, or the way that she even just spoke about Chalky?
It's funny, but when she spoke about Chalky, it reminded me of the first time that my mother took me to a well-known hunter stable, Waverly Farm. They had an extension of it. It was there in Warrenton and also in South Florida. South Florida isn't the armpit that some people think it is, especially for horses. But when I went there with my mother, and they brought this chestnut horse out that eventually became mine, Tom Waverly.
Tom.
And the sun hit him. I was thinking of that when she told me about seeing Chalky for the first time, and watching her walk and all these other things. I totally get it, especially chestnut. I mean, show me a chestnut horse and it's all over.
Show me a chestnut horse, it's all over. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it made me think of it too, because it seemed not only a personal relationship with Chalky, but it was also, in my mind, it changed Sylvia's career a little bit. This idea of not just being an owner, but then becoming a breeder as well, and then a trainer, for the offspring.
And
too.
that was truly, totally hers.
Yeah.
Definitely. And if I recall correctly, the foals were by a stallion that her attorney owned.
Right, and they were Australian stallions too.
And one of them had originally come from Australia over to here, yes. And the last name of those owners was Bushong. And I would see that name because I spent all that time in the courthouse. I would see the name signed on the documents quite a bit.
I thought it was fascinating too that so Sylvia had purchased Chalky, was her horse. She had paid a stud fee to have Chalky bred, but she was not allowed in the breeding barn.
Yeah.
Because she was a woman.
Nina remembers that. There was a day, and maybe there still is in some places, where women were not
even allowed near the breeding sheds. Yeah.
No, yeah. Well, it's all different now. They videotape it and everything. They want to make sure that they're getting what's advertised, what they paid for. Okay. Because when I did another book a few years ago, and I went out to Three Chimneys, I witnessed the videotape, and I also think the stud manager there was a woman.
So there you go. Again, like it's amazing how in the space of a generation or two, so many things that we wouldn't necessarily think twice about in terms of, the impropriety, of being in a breeding shed, even when you are the major stakeholder in making sure, right, that your horse is bred.
Well, that wasn't my first job, but I did work at the Washington Post for some time. And I knew damn well that I was there because they needed to fulfill the female quota. Okay. And by the way, Nina, I got that job after covering the 3-day event, the Rolex thing, but I took the
Good job,
attitude,
Vicky. Well done.
yeah, but I took the attitude that it's only an issue if you allow it to be an issue.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. And so that was it in the sports department, but I still don't know a first down from first base.
Well, that's you and me both. I guess Len has that covered though. He's good.
He's good.
Can handle that. He
That's
can handle
funny.
that.
Funny.
So I think one of the themes that comes up a lot when we talk about, not just sport of yesteryear, but this sporting happening today, whether it's at Charlestown or whether it's, beagling, whether it's the trials, or whether it's steeplechasing, which of course it's high steeplechase season now.
Yep.
Is the talk about, so what's next and how do we keep it going? And part of that is where do we keep it going? As I mentioned, a lot of these racetracks, being at places like Timonium or Hagerstown or no longer having tracks at all anymore, they're now parking lots. And I wonder, Vicky, while you were doing research for this book, how much of that did you encounter where you're talking about places where this used to happen, but it doesn't now, or places that it used to happen, but it's just not the way that it was?
Yeah, there are quite a few places that no longer are racing. And the place that really got me was Cumberland, because I kept reading about it over and over again. And finally we drove over there. It's a beautiful drive to Cumberland, and it's now like a racetrack, or I don't know what kind of cars they do. But
I see.
Yeah. And so it was a Sunday, but the front gate was open. And as we drove in the front gate, I thought I was going to cry because the grandstand there is just fabulous. I have so many pictures because the man who managed the place for life happened to be there. And he said, you can go in the office and you can take pictures or scan pictures. You can do whatever you want.
Oh.
And so I didn't even get to do but 1 or 2 pictures in the book, but what a marvelous, and against the backdrop of this rock, I have the name of the rock in the book, and the tunnel there, the railroad.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
In terms of, obviously you are very active in the Middleburg area, you're active in the Florida equestrian community too. Do you have any favorite spots that are still preserved and are still active?
That's a very good question, because everything in Florida isn't what it once was. I'm thinking particularly of Gulfstream, and I would be there right now if this stuff wasn't going on, because the Florida Derby is tomorrow or Saturday. Okay. And of course you have to love Saratoga, but the rest is all new, except Timonium is fun. You can eat the fried dough, right?
I mean, it doesn't hurt, right?
No.
That's not too bad. That's not too bad. What about you, Nina? I'm sure that, as a not only as an athlete, but also as, a landscape designer, you have some thoughts about the preservation of open space, the use of open space. Do you have any favorite sites or pet projects?
Well, I'll sort of stray a little bit from that question and sort of describe that the sport of eventing in particular, when it started, or when I was doing it, say a while ago, most of the events took place on private farms, whether it was in the Green Spring Valley or here at Trish Gilbert's Walnut Hall Farm in Berryville, back to Berryville, Virginia.
Yeah.
And as those landowners left or sold their properties, the sport of eventing really requires land acreage primarily for the cross-country phase. The other disciplines can be done in an arena format, the dressage and show jumping. So the sport of eventing has really also been targeting what I call multi-use facilities, whether it's the Kentucky Horse Park, which can host steeplechases as well as events, as well as horse shows and the like. Tryon is now one. Morven Park here in Leesburg is a multi-use facility. And that is going, Great Meadow here in the Plains, Virginia. That is going to be Fair Hill in Maryland.
Mm.
Those areas are the future of horse sports. These multi-use facilities that have some green space. We just have to pinch ourselves that they're still with us with the green space and work very hard to keep them as such, because as my mother would say, once you lose it, you've lost it forever. And we can't afford to lose these green spaces. Do I have a favorite? All of the ones I mentioned, because they're still green and they're there. But we need the undulating topography. We need the trees to sequester carbon. We need the green grass to remember that that's what horses eat. We just need to maintain as many of our natural resources as we can for horse sports. I know it's hard. Arena footing is necessary for impaction and lots of horses going around, but to have a little bit of both is still good.
And I think you bring up an important point too, that, open space for equestrian sport, is also open space for, not only, the ecosystems benefit, but there are also economic benefits to having these open spaces and having these sports and having, this industry continue in our area.
Exactly.
And the Heritage area just recently did a report profiting from preservation that kind of touches on some of these notes. And so I didn't necessarily anticipate going into that direction.
Sorry.
No, I think since you brought it up, but you're absolutely right that all of these points, whether it's about the history of individuals in our area, right? Whether it's about the history of someone who is breaking barriers, is raising a bar, is doing something important, it's intertwined with the story of, ecological preservation.
Yes.
And the history and the culture of this area. And so it's fun to see all of those threads tying together. And it's also fun. I did not anticipate necessarily Berryville coming up as much as it did. So anyone at home who was playing a drinking game for Berryville, I think they're the real winners tonight.
That's a winner.
Oh, Lordy.
So I was curious. I know that Nina read the book, and I was curious, not to put you on the spot, but I'm going to put you on the spot. Did you have a favorite part of the book, or something that you learned about Sylvia that particularly stuck with you?
For me, what stuck with me was just the heartwarming reality that she stuck with it during all of her hardships and setbacks, because that was her passion and that was her happy place, and good on her.
Yeah. And it sounds like you identify with that too. I mean, it sounds like you have a kindred spirit.
Well, totally. And, it was once said to me by a very close friend that sometimes a connection with an animal can really save one's life and save one's spirit. And it's just another outlet and another source of security. And it's something that she knew she could do well. And it's something that she was happy doing. And we should all be so lucky as to find something that gives us that much gratification.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because it's not about the size of the check or, how much money you make. It's got to be the journey, the joy of the journey.
That's a really good point too. And it's another theme that comes up pretty consistently through the books, through the book's narrative, is we talk about her wins. We talk about her winner's circle moments. We talk about how, of course, in 70 starts, you may only win 7, especially when you're doing flat racing and you're racing them. So you have so many more starts to your career, than you would in other sports. And I really love that, because it shows the tenacity that she.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it didn't seem as though she was afraid to stick to her guns and see it through and take the gamble, because to her, she'd already won. She was doing what she was doing. And Vicky, I don't know if you could speak more to that in terms of, in terms of her, stick-to-itiveness, or, the idea that she's in it to win it, but she's in it to be there to do the job.
Yeah. Well, I, of course, had no idea going into it that would be the theme of her life, which echoes what I'm doing now. I mean, 15 years, I probably wrote 2 books in between. It was the research that killed me. Okay. It was the research for how much a loaf of bread was
Mhm.
at that time, and what was the history. And I really didn't have a clue going into it that was what I was going to write. I know you've heard other people say it, but when you start writing, you're like in another world.
Mhm.
And I went into that coma, and somehow it happened.
Well, I'm glad that it did. I would say that, one of the things that I wouldn't have thought of, I wouldn't have put it together, but I think is such a striking thing about her life, is that she was one of 17 children total. Was it
Exactly.
that many? It
Yeah.
was so many, so many. But she was actually raised by
Another family.
another family, by family friends, not by her own parents. And she was the only child. Was she the only child to be taken out of the home that way?
I think that that couple, when they were married, it was a second marriage, I think, for both.
Mhm.
And one of them had lost a daughter. I did find, the daughter in the graveyard. And so who knows how or why that happened, but I think Sylvia was only the third one born or whatever, which seems like, well, her mother didn't know what overwhelmed mean
Yeah.
yet. But keep in mind, her mother was a midwife. So
Right.
maybe she was compassionate that these people had lost a child. I don't know that they ever did. I mean, yes, a child did die, but not, in childbirth or anything like that. But it had to be something. And of course, then they left everything to Sylvia, which
Mhm.
was somewhat of a godsend to her later in life.
Yeah. Yeah. And that to me was fascinating because
Yeah.
because it seemed like the best and worst of both worlds,
Yeah.
that she had opportunities that maybe her siblings didn't, but that she did grow up being kind of other from her family, even though she visited them weekly. They had Sunday dinners and things like
Absolutely,
that.
yeah,
And it seemed as though she found her family, at the racetrack
definitely.
in kind of a literal sense, in that one of her sisters ends up marrying a trainer who's
No,
at the
two sisters
two sisters.
married 2 brothers.
So
And
literally, yeah.
then to the racetrack, and I know Nina went then. The
Yep.
last name of those brothers was Barry. I mean,
Mhm.
you couldn't go to Charlestown and
Yeah.
not see one of those Barrys. There's still a Barry around. Saddle a horse. I mean, and Nina's father knew them. Everybody knew them.
Yeah.
I can remember going there,
Yeah.
like in college when I had nothing to do, I would go to the racetrack there. And I remember that name.
Mhm. Mhm. So it's really neat to see, where she may have grown up having those feelings of estrangement, then her family is there, is kind of
Yeah.
wrapped up.
Yeah. And what would have happened if she hadn't had that pony ride? It was the people that, took her in that paid the 25 cents for that
Yeah.
priceless photo.
Amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's such a fascinating, she's such a fascinating woman in her own right. And it really sheds light on parts of history I hadn't necessarily considered before, and certainly an individual that I wasn't familiar with. And I was curious.
Okay.
Go ahead, Vicky.
I wanted to add something.
Yeah.
I'm watching and listening to Nina, and the Fout family has been so key in several books that I have written. Nina was in I think the Middleburg book.
Mhm.
And then when I did a book on Jackie Kennedy, her mother took photographs off the wall, allowed me to scan them, spent time telling me about the whole thing, the whole connection with the Fouts and Mrs. Kennedy. And then I did a book on style, and there's Nina's brother. That's 3 books of Fout's, 3 different subjects.
So then it's only fitting that to talk about this latest book, there's not a Fout in it, so we have to bring one on to help us dissect it. I think that's how that. I think
All
that's
I
how the
can
rule
say
works.
is thank you to the Fout family.
I echo those sentiments. Absolutely. We did have one question coming in from the audience who was curious about Nina's experience in the Olympics, but specifically what does it take to qualify, and how did you come into that journey?
Well, the qualifications today would probably most likely be different from back in 2000 when I went to the Olympics. We still had the long format of eventing, which included on cross country day, roads and tracks, and steeplechase. The sport has changed to a shorter, condensed version of cross country and placed greater intensity and emphasis on the rigors of dressage and show jumping to offset that sort of change in balance of the structure of the sport. So I'm happy to say in the year Y2K, that was the last of the long format competition. And I'm glad that I was a part of it, because the horse I rode then was strictly a long format running and jumping thoroughbred, and he would not be competitive in today's world. To get qualified for the Olympics really got down to a question of when the selectors were looking for horses to go to the Olympics, you had to have a set requirement of so many completed competitions to satisfy the level of experience so that the selectors felt competent to send you abroad. So basically several years before the Olympics, we were all busily chasing big competitions that would help gain experience. I went to England and I rode around Badminton and Burley with Beanie to get some international experience, came back, did 2 Rolexes, and then the chips were on the table in terms of then the selectors put a pool of 30 of us into quarantine in the 1st of July, and by the end of July, 10 or 12 of us flew out to Sydney, and then the attrition rate kept whittling itself down. I didn't even know until the night before the opening ceremonies whether I was in the games or out of the games. So you can imagine the stress level, because we started with this big number of people, and once a week they would keep paring the group down. And I was one of very few people with only 1 horse. Several of the people who were there in that experience had more than 1 horse, but I just had my 1 toy. So I worked very hard at making sure I protected him and kept him in cotton wool and protected, right? Because it really got down to not who the best one was, but the last man standing, the last group of horses went in there under the wire. And my biggest takeaway was that I felt like I wasn't there for myself. I felt like I was there representing all my friends who couldn't go. That pool of 30, I felt like we were all on equal footing, and I was just the lucky one that happened to go with a sound horse on the right day at the right time. But the stress level was pretty great. And no one ever told me about the downside of the heart-wrenching, gut-wrenching experience that my fellow friends and teammates felt that didn't make the journey with us, because there was only a slot for 4 and for 3 individuals. And when you think that we started out with that big group in quarantine 2 months earlier, and that it whittled down to our small group, it's a pretty tough emotional journey. And you have to stay mentally tough the whole time. And that's why I closed my shop. It was a big deal, flying halfway around the world with your horse and being in quarantine for 2 months, 1 month here, another couple of weeks over in Australia. And I closed up my business to do it.
Yeah,
so I put all my chips on the table. I really rolled the dice.
Yeah.
With 1 horse. I rolled the dice with 1 horse. Yeah. But it all worked out.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. What a journey. And I can't imagine trying to not put all the chips on the table doing something like that, but you've got to if you're going to do it, you've got to do it. And luckily for you, you had 3 magic beans on your side. So that's.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. I was the luckiest kid on the block. Yeah.
I was curious, I think, Nina, probably for better or worse on an international stage, I think that your Olympic medal is probably going to be your claim to fame on your Wikipedia article or whatever it might be. If you could pick your legacy, what might you choose?
What might I choose? I think I would like my legacy to be inspiring the next generation forward to really enjoy horse sports, the out of doors, preservation, conservation. Yeah, I think that's what to give back and to help others like other people help me.
That's great.
I like that. And then Vicky, actually kind of same question. You've written many books. And I would hazard a guess that this book about Sylvia is the one that's really about a hometown hero, I guess is the best way to describe it. You write about a lot of socialite history. Jackie Kennedy is a good example of someone who's a real person, and you bring up that humanity, but she's a household name. What would you think of as being your legacy, either as an author, as an individual?
Well, it definitely would be this one, anything that takes 15 years, which is probably equal to the time that Nina spent with her, making her horse and going to the Olympics. This would be my Olympic medal for sure. And who knows what's in the future for this book.
Mm-hmm.
It has all the right parts, and we'll see.
Well, I see nothing but positive things, I think, for this book. Yeah. And I think it's interesting too for her own part, Sylvia's Olympic medal, if we can use that as the barometer, it seems as though that her claim to fame is really that she was the first licensed African American woman trainer of thoroughbreds. Do you think that's how she saw herself, though? Because it seems as though she saw herself as a trainer, but in my perspective, in reading this book and learning about her, she didn't seem to hang her hat on that.
No, she didn't. And to go there, especially the first time I went to her apartment and I sat down on the couch. I mean, she was like in her little duster, and something like, so anybody would wear, to run around the house. But to sit down there with her and look at those photos would be like to sit down with Nina or her father or anybody else in the family and go through the win photos. It was just incredible. And I just felt immediate connection.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And there were many times that I could have quit, but how do you quit when you have like crates and crates of notes and racing charts?
Yeah.
You can't.
Right. And as you say that she was still, she passed away in December of 2005, but then right up to the very end, she was looking at the Daily Racing Forum and she was still very studious about it. It wasn't just a thing that she used to do. She was still, she still had her fingers in things, it seemed.
I'm sure that Nina's father was looking at those racing forms, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's true. Oh, and
their daily Bible.
Yes. Yeah. It's like a horoscope, but for horsey people, I think it's strange.
Yep. Pretty much.
Yeah.
Pretty much. Yep.
We had another question from the crowd. And this is open question, anyone. But there's a question about whether the shift from, when you're 3-day eventing, a shift from a longer form to a shorter form, if that has impacted, or if you think it will impact land conservation that's affiliated with it, if there's less focus on the cross country.
One of the motivations for shortening the format was to mitigate the stress on trying to maintain and finding large tracts of land. But I do find that a little bit of a double-edged sword, because I hope that's not a cop-out for the sport in general. But really the intensity has been now to try to bring the cross country more into view. So it's more similar to having one or two strategic viewing locations, more like a timber race, less like a hurdle race, because sometimes timber races can spread out a little bit more on an undulating format. So basically trying to make all three components of the sport of eventing more spectator friendly. And all that also has been triggered, you see, by sponsorship and social media, because it's a different world now. So the sport has evolved with those new demands. Is it better? I don't know how to answer that. I think it's different. And certainly the horse is now different in the sense that the horse has to be extremely well versed in all three disciplines. When I was active at the international level, the horses that were very fit and very strong and who could really run and jump and had a serious amount of endurance, who were very sound horses, they could really excel at the sport. So it's a different world and a different sport altogether.
Yeah, that's a good observation. And you see similar changes, I guess similar and different, of course, you know, with race tracks as well. And, you know, we talk about, you know, some of the evolution that's happened there in terms of like, it used to be, you know, that you go and you pack your picnic and you know, have that. And now there is concession. Now there are fried dough stands, you know, and things that we see kind of illuminated through the book. And Vicky, as someone who's tuned into kind of the race circuit now, do you see an evolution or a change in terms of site conservation?
Well, no, not in site conservation, because they're going to sell Arlington Park. It's not going to be a racetrack. That's huge.
Yeah.
You know, and as far as I know, Pimlico is going to be renovated, shall we say, but it's not going to be strictly a racetrack. There's going to be other things in there. And so what happens when people walk across this surface or whatever, and we shall see. Pimlico's a grand old place.
Yeah, it's definitely, I think, probably a question that's at the forefront of everyone's minds, you know, in the equestrian community. Is like, so, you know, what happens next? And I think that many of the folks who are on the inside, you know, are of the same mindset in terms of what, you know, what should happen, you know, versus maybe what will or what seems likely.
Well, all of that said, you know, I do live in South Florida, and I love, not everybody, not all the horsemen love Gulfstream, but I'll say from a spectator point of view, and also convenience for me. I mean, if I time it right, I don't leave until, you know, like 2:30 or 3, because I know when the feature race is, but I can go straight down to Gulfstream, and there's restaurants, there's bars. I mean, there's something for everyone. They have shopping there. And so if they're going to do that at Pimlico, maybe it'll work.
Yeah, a whole user experience. Well, this is a good opportunity. We've answered, I think, most of the questions that folks have been asking us on Facebook. So this is a good chance to get your questions in. I did want to leave one last nugget, but maybe on a more hopeful note, you know, to point out and to ask. I know that Nina is working with the young people, you know, as they say, both with Pony Club and Beagling. Can you tell us a little bit about those endeavors and what that means? You know, who are the next generation of folks who are coming into this?
Well, I'm speaking really from a local perspective here in the Middleburg, Virginia area. Kids on ponies at the local day schools seem enthusiastic, so we're going to try to cultivate and nurture their interest and make sure that they stay interested. because I really do firmly believe that kids are going to be the future of conservation and preservation. So we got to get them while they're young, where they think this is all fun and important. So when they grow up, they can take an active role in continuing to preserve all the stuff that's so precious.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, our Beagle program, if anybody wants to check out our website, it's the acronym mocbeagles.org, where people can see all the outreach programs that the kids have been involved with, stream monitoring with the Goose Creek Association, some learning activities with the Blue Ridge Wildlife Center, and then mountain hunting, and then chasing rabbits on foot. So that's anybody who wants to come to the National Beagle Club to see some rabbit hunting at the Beagle Trials, just email me and I'll give you more information on that. But yeah, it's just enjoying life in the country. Well, it's still country.
Yes.
I had a question because I've gotten a text message here from Missy James. She couldn't figure out where to go. So this will remain on your Facebook page as
Yeah.
a video, right?
Yeah. So this video will be on our Facebook page. You'll see it in our post history. We
Nice.
will also be uploading it onto our YouTube channel. So if you go to youtube.com and you search for the Virginia Piedmont Heritage Area, you will find us, and this video will also live right there. So you won't have to scroll through Facebook, you know, if you want to find this link later on.
Okay, so but if she wants to go onto Facebook, she just searches for Virginia Piedmont Heritage Area, right?
Right. That's
Yeah.
right.
Okay.
We'll be there. And then Vicky, for your part, I know that you've had quite the book tour circuit for this. I guess the virtual
My book
circuit.
tour has taken me to Millwood and Berryville and Charlestown. And it's been delightful, and a lot of Zoom, and you know, in West Virginia, the state of West Virginia, the governor and the governor's wife embraced me in the biggest way. And I did several things for them. One of them is conflicting at this time that has already been taped. But that was another coincidence, because the First Lady's right hand happens to be a very good friend of mine who worked for Herman Greenberg way back when. But more than I expected.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's fabulous. If folks are interested in your book, where can they go to find out more?
Well, it's on, I have a website, vickymoon.com, or which is the hardback, or on Amazon, you can get the hardback, or it's already in paperback.
Great. Before we sign off, are there any final parting words or words of wisdom from Nina or from Vicky?
Never give up.
Yep, I agree with that. Just stick to it. If you enjoy it, stick with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's one of Sylvia's key messages too.
Yeah.
So from the Virginia Piedmont Heritage Area, I want to thank you all for joining us tonight. You can still send in questions in the comments, and if Nina and Vicky agree, I can get those sent over later on if folks are interested in finding out more. Again, this video will live on our Facebook page, will also be posted to our YouTube channel going forward, so you will always have a chance to refer back to it or to link it to a friend who missed out tonight. Again, Nina Fout, Vicky Moon, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Nina.
Thank you all very much.
Yep. Okay, see you soon.
Good night.